Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 4 waiver wire targets for the 2023 fantasy football season. Over the course of today's episode, we're going to be talking about prospects at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, kicker, and defensive positions. Players who can hopefully make an immediate impact in Week 4, but could also have sustained value for the remainder of the 2023 season. Because not only are we all dealing with the plague of injuries, like we do every single season, we're also going to have to deal with bye weeks beginning in Week 5. So hopefully these fantasy prospects that we are able to pick up in Week 4 are able to give us a lot of potential for the remainder of the season. Now, in regards to some of these prospects, some of these players are far more valuable than others, and you want to go ahead and utilize your number one priority if you have the opportunity to do so. The player that was not on my bingo card going into Sunday's games, to which he was going to be able to put up 200 plus total rushing yards and 4 touchdowns, and should be the number one priority player going into Week 4, Achane, rookie running back of the Miami Dolphins. Achane's 4 touchdown performance is all time, tied 17th amongst all players that are non-quarterbacks in terms of total touchdowns scored in a singular game. Unbelievable performance. At this current moment in time, he's currently rostered in 41% of Yahoo leagues and 46% of sleeper leagues. So if in fact he is somehow, gotten past all of your league mates and he is not hidden as a stash play on someone's bench, hopefully you have the opportunity to go pick up this running back, someone who had 18 rushing attempts, 203 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 4 receptions on 4 targets, 30 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns, all for 49.3 fantasy points. The fact of the matter is that'll probably end up being Achane's best performance of his entire career for fantasy purposes, but it doesn't mean that he's not going to be of incredible value going forward. He only played 30 of the 78 overall snaps for the offense, yet he still put up 49 fantasy points, all while Raheem Mostert played 37 of the 78 total offensive snaps, had 140 plus total yards, and 4 touchdowns himself. The coexistence of both these running backs somehow accumulating 8 touchdowns as a combined duo is unbelievable. Not only that, there were a lot of different circumstances throughout that game when I watched it back in which both these guys are on the field at the same time. Sometimes Raheem Mostert used as a blocking back, as a lead blocker. Sometimes Achane motioned out of the backfield and used out wide. Again, there is so much potential, but what they both inherently have that really you can't teach is speed. This Miami Dolphins attack is a track team. The fact of the matter is there is no team in terms of their overall skill position being faster. According to Next Gen Stats, the fastest player in the National Football League on a singular play this season has been Tyreek Hill. The next fastest, Achane. Yesterday, his 67-yard rushing touchdown accumulated a 21.93 mile per hour speed. Not only that, the third fastest player tracked thus far this season, Raheem Mostert. Again, there is so much potential within this offense. Obviously, we saw Achane at the NFL draft, considering he's a rookie, put up a 4.32 40-yard dash speed. Not only does he have speed, but he has the ability to make plays after contact. Yesterday, he had 112 total yards after contact, which is a 6.22 yard after contact per attempt average. Additionally, he has receiving upside. 4 receptions on 4 targets. That little shovel pass obviously helped him. Raheem Mostert was able to accumulate himself 7 receptions on 7 targets. So Tua Tagovailoa targeting his running backs yesterday 11 times. That is an intriguing number that we have to keep an eye on. And there's a potential in which Achane, quite frankly, could end up taking over this backfield and being the primary number 1. With that, he has incredible value. And if you still have enough fab and you didn't utilize it on players like Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams, or potentially Jerome Ford last week, this is the player you might want to unload the clip on, considering how much upside he has and the offense that he's associated with. Now, before we continue on, a reminder, there are timestamps down in the description of the video. Any statistic that I mention for the remainder of the video is going to be for a half PPR scoring format, meaning everyone in the middle in a standard league or a full PPR league. Additionally, for those of you guys who have not yet already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Again, we are very close of reaching our goal of 80,000 subscribers. Over the course of the entirety of the 2023 season, I'll be posting daily fantasy football content, whether it is waiver wire videos, rankings videos at all 4 primary positions. We have trade targets, rest of season strength of schedule, rest of season rankings, live streams on the weekends, all of that for the singular purpose of trying to help you win a fantasy football championship. So if you have not yet already, be sure to subscribe. Thank you very much for the support. Also, for those of you who are down in the description, be sure to check out Underdog Fantasy at this current moment in time. If you go ahead and sign up using code Andrew and make a first-time deposit minimum of $10, not only are you going to get a deposit match up to $500, which is the new promotion, but you're also going to get my week 4 through 18 rankings sent to you every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. Those rankings are by position, by tier, half PPR and full PPR, and includes top 120 flex. So if you guys are interested in getting my rankings every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season, season in order to have an advantage upon your league mates, be sure to go ahead, use code Andrew, check out Underdog Fantasy. For those of you who are wondering if you're eligible, the map to the right side of the screen should determine your eligibility. Be sure to go ahead, draft responsibly via Underdog Fantasy. Go ahead and play the Pick'ems game tonight for the Monday night contest between the Philadelphia Eagles and, of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. A lot of fun to be had there via Underdog Fantasy, and of course, draft responsibly. Thank you very much. All right, let's talk about the remainder of the running back position. I wanted to go ahead and just display them all on screen because in comparison to Devon Achane, there is a huge tier of drop-off in comparison. Now, I wanted to mention Tyjae Spears second because Derrick Henry did not look great yesterday. 11 rushing attempts for 20 rushing yards, on top of the fact that Derrick Henry earlier in week 3 didn't practice on Thursday. He was listed to have had a rest day / toe injury over the course of the week. If in fact there is a situation in which he's dealing with a turf toe, and that's something that is only going to compromise him as we continue on, having Tyjae Spears not only as a player that you could have on your bench as a stash option, but a handcuff for those of you who have Derrick Henry or potentially are looking to take over the services of Derrick Henry if in fact he's going to miss time. This is something that could end up being of value, especially where the Tennessee Titans are potentially trending. If they continue to lose games, there may be a conversation in which they trade him to another organization if in fact Derrick Henry and his overall utilization is being wasted on a team that is not going to be making it to the NFL playoffs. Now, the third player that I wanted to mention is Matt Breida. Matt Breida in specific only benefits from the fact that Saquon Barkley could end up missing this upcoming week. Saquon Barkley, if in fact he does miss, again, there will be a pretty significant span of time between the last time we saw him against the Arizona Cardinals and taking on the Seattle Seahawks on Monday Night Football in week 4. But if in fact he does miss, taking on the Seattle Seahawks is a very advantageous matchup. Besides the fact that Matt Breida was able to put up 9.3 fantasy points against the San Francisco 49ers defense, obviously was the primary goal line back and got himself 3 receptions. But there is a potential in which taking on the Seattle Seahawks could benefit. We have seen Kyren Williams, David Montgomery, and Miles Sanders all at the running back position score double-digit fantasy points. All of them accumulate over 50 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown against that defense thus far this season. So why not Matt Breida? The fourth player I wanted to mention is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is purely just a player that if in fact you're dealing with a boatload of injuries, you're in a deeper league, and you need a player that has the ability to score fantasy points in the given week just to go ahead and fill in some gaps due to injury. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and the Kansas City Chiefs, they take on the New York Jets Sunday Night Football. It is going to be a one-sided affair, just like the way that this most recent game for the Kansas City Chiefs was against the Chicago Bears, where Clyde Edwards-Helaire was able to accumulate 15 rushing attempts, 55 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown, 12.2 fantasy points. Again, this should be a garbage time game in which Clyde Edwards could score himself a good volume of points against the New York Jets. We talk about Melvin Gordon at number 5. Between him and Kenyon Drake, there is a potential in which they both get a good volume of touches going into the given week, but we'll have to wait and see whether or not Justice Hill returns, primarily because Gus Edwards left yesterday's game due to a concussion. He is currently on the concussion protocol, and there is a high likelihood in which Gus Edwards does not return in week 4. So if in fact Justice Hill misses, and so does Gus Edwards, Melvin Gordon will be the next man up. He had 10 rushing attempts in yesterday's game against the Indianapolis Colts in the absence of Gus Edwards. The final running back I wanted to mention is Rico Dowdle, the backup running back for Tony Pollard. The volume of touches that the Dallas Cowboys have given Tony Pollard thus far this season is a lot. Let's just be honest. Even in the offseason, when I was talking about Tony Pollard getting a lot of touches this year, I wasn't expecting him to get 25 touches a game. I was thinking more like 18 to 20. But the fact of the matter is they're continuing to give him a high volume of touches. I wanted to go ahead and make sure that my investment of Tony Pollard is secured in the idea that I have his backup. On top of the fact that Rico Dowdle is also getting himself good utilization in terms of red zone rushing attempts and, of course, receiving upside within the given weeks, which makes him of value. But purely, I want to protect my investment of Tony Pollard going forward. Okay, let's go ahead and move on and let's talk about the wide receiver position beginning for week 4. We have major news coming out this morning that unfortunately, Mike Williams, starting wide receiver of the Los Angeles Chargers, has a season-ending ACL injury. With that taken into account, the primary reason why I believe Joshua Palmer is the guy to go after is because, first and foremost, he has a high range of availability. He's only rostered in 3% of Yahoo leagues and 5% of sleeper leagues. Already, whether it's via training camp or during the regular season, Joshua Palmer has been the next man up. Quentin Johnston, the rookie wide receiver that was drafted in the first round by the Los Angeles Chargers out of TCU, hasn't made an immediate impact. And whether it was via training camp or whether the regular season, we have always seen him behind Joshua Palmer within the starting lineup. So my expectation is that that trend is only going to continue. We have seen Joshua Palmer play 64, 54, and 61% of the offensive snaps, while on the other end, we have seen Quentin Johnston only play 27, 15, and 24% of the snaps in the first 3 games of the season. Obviously, in the absence of Mike Williams yesterday, Joshua Palmer, 4 catches on 7 targets, 66 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. And going forward, we have an idea as to what to expect out of Joshua Palmer, considering he was such a high utilized position within this offense last year in the absence of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Last season, 2022, weeks 9 through 10, without Mike Williams or Keenan Allen in the lineup. Both of them were injured. Throughout those 2 games, we saw Joshua Palmer accumulate 18 targets, 11 receptions, 150 receiving yards, 20.5 fantasy points, about 10 points per game in a half PPR scoring format. Now, when you go ahead to week 11 through 13, a 3-game span in which Keenan Allen returned and Mike Williams was still out due to injury, we saw Joshua Palmer accumulate 28 targets, 20 receptions, 222 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and 44.2 fantasy points. Just to put this in perspective, that's 9.3 targets per game, 6.7 receptions per game, 74 receiving yards per game, 0.67 receiving touchdowns per game, and 14.73 half PPR fantasy points per game. There is a lot of value to be had, and if you want to go ahead and pick up someone to immediately fill in and make an impact for Mike Williams, it's Joshua Palmer. And we're going to mention Quentin Johnston in just a moment, but I believe immediately the initial impact, and if in fact you're trying to get your team back on the winning side going forward, Joshua Palmer can be a starting option going forward within an offense that is obviously elite in the passing game. Moving on to our number 2, we have Tank Dell, rookie wide receiver, for the 2nd consecutive week, an incredible performance. 5 catches, 145 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown, all off of the back of his week 2 performance in which he had 7 catches for 72 and a receiving touchdown. I've told this story before, and I'll say it again. When CJ Stroud was selected and drafted 2nd overall of the 2023 NFL draft, he got a text from Tank Dell. Tank Dell said, hey, tell them to come get me. And he said, I got you. And that's exactly what they did. They went and they drafted Tank Dell and made him a member of the Houston Texans. And going forward, the level at which we have seen CJ Stroud already progress in the National Football League among the Houston Texans receiving options, I mean, CJ Stroud has looked incredible, and it's only going to help elevate Tank Dell as they continue as an offense that is probably going to be in a lot of negative game scripts in which they're going to be throwing for majority of games for the remainder of the season. And the fact that they do not have an offensive line that is healthy and that forces them to not be able to run the ball consistently, Tank Dell, another one of these options currently rostered in 30% of Yahoo leagues, 48% of sleeper leagues, should be picked up immediately. Romeo Doubs is the next wide receiver I wanted to mention. We did not see Christian Watson and Aaron Jones play once again. And if in fact going into the Thursday night matchup against the Detroit Lions, they are going to miss again, considering, there is a chance in which they just want to keep them healthy. They don't want to have them play on such a short week. I mean, they didn't play on Sunday for a reason. Maybe they were saving them for Thursday, but time will tell. Romeo Doubs going forward as the number 2 wide receiver after Christian Watson, I mean, he's going to go against number 2 cornerback coverage. And when that's the case, he's going to find success. Already thus far this season, he has a game of 16.6 fantasy points and 15.8 in a half PPR scoring format. Yesterday's game was targeted 12 total times. And even though Jordan Love's overall passing completion percentage and his overall accuracy isn't the top at the quarterback position, the fact of the matter is this team is continuously throwing the ball and they're finding a lot of red zone upside with their receivers. Therefore, Romeo Doubs, rostered in 41% of Yahoo leagues, 52% of sleeper leagues, should be on roster. Let's move on to Quentin Johnston, rookie wide receiver out of TCU. We mentioned him a little bit earlier. If in fact you are looking for a player to be a later stash, like a Devon Achane, in which you stashed him on your bench, a Roschon Johnson, stash him on the bench, that going forward, they're eventually going to have a breakout performance and perhaps take over the starting job, Quentin Johnston is that. But again, it's just a matter of what your roster looks like going forward. If in fact you are pretty much set at the wide receiver position, you're thinking, you know what, I just want to go ahead, stash this player, so by the time I get to potentially week 8, 10, 12, and this guy eventually takes over for Joshua Palmer, then I have a starting wide receiver that associated with Justin Herbert is going to have incredible value, especially considering this team is elite. They have Kellen Moore that has elevated their passing attack, and on top of it, have an extremely easy strength of schedule going forward. So again, it's just a matter of how you want to evaluate your team, what you require at this current moment in time. And if you're able to get both Joshua, Palmer and Quentin Johnston on your team because the rest of your league is sleeping at the wheel, I mean, by all means, go for it. Number 5 is Adam Thielen. Now, besides the fact that he had a great performance last Monday, I mean, unfortunately, he wasn't included on the waiver wire episode last Monday because the recording was before the 2 Monday games, just like this one is before the Tampa Bay Buccaneers take on the Philadelphia Eagles and Rams take on the Cincinnati Bengals. So Adam Thielen last week had himself a performance of 7 catches on 9 targets, 54 receiving yards and a touchdown, 16.9 fantasy points against a good defense in the New Orleans Saints with Bryce Young. But going against the Seattle Seahawks, we talked about it during the week, specifically during the weekend's live streams on Saturday and Sunday. Again, be sure to join us Sunday mornings. This upcoming Sunday, we're going to have a very early live stream because there is a Germany game that starts at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be there live streaming, answering questions, and getting everything good to go. But the reason that Adam Thielen had such an upside performance, first and foremost, was the influence of Andy Dalton playing over Bryce Young, having 59 total passing attempts, but it also had to do with the fact that 3 of the starting defensive backs for the Seattle Seahawks were out in the given week. It only opened up more opportunity for Adam Thielen. 11 catches, 145, and a garbage time touchdown. We love to see it. Started in my home league and delivered a massive performance of 20-plus fantasy points. Now move on to the other wide receiver within the Carolina Panthers offense. It is DJ Chark. DJ Chark obviously benefited from the fact that he had himself a high level of opportunity of 11 total targets, only 4 receptions, but he made some incredible catches. If in fact this team starts to throw the ball far less with Bryce Young, which is expected to be the case, 58 passing attempts isn't something that they're going to be able to consistently do with Bryce Young. So going forward, we'll probably see DJ Chark take a little bit of a back seat in comparison to Adam Thielen, but ultimately Jonathan Mingo in the concussion protocol going into the given week. I'm expecting DJ Chark, currently only rostered in 10% of Yahoo leagues, 15% of sleeper leagues, to be of value. Now, the remainder of the wide receiver position consists of a lot of rookies and a lot of players that, again, are being slept on. Josh Downs, 12 total targets, 8 receptions, 9.7 fantasy points. He's been the number 3 wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts thus far this season in terms of total snaps, 79, 75, and 80%. He's a rookie wide receiver, but as soon as we get Anthony Richardson back, hopefully they're going to continue to get him utilized, considering Michael Pittman Jr. is the number 1, Alec Pierce is asleep at the number 2 spot, and Josh Downs is continuing to carve out more of a workload, going as the number 3. Michael Gallup's our number 8, primarily because in comparison to Brandon Cooks, he looks like he is more of the preferred target upside player within that offense, seeing far more targets and utilization than Brandon Cooks did. Obviously, Brandon Cooks has dealt with an injury already this season, which doesn't help his overall rest of the season if, in fact, that re-aggravates. Marvin Mims, not only did he make a huge catch for a touchdown in week 2, he had himself a huge play down the field in week 3 and a kickoff return. He's consistently starting to score a lot of fantasy points, and as a rookie within this offense, again, continuing to carve out a role going forward. Rashee Rice, another one of these rookie second-round wide receiver selections. He had himself a pretty high volume of his overall opportunity with Patrick Mahomes in the game in the first half. So going forward, if in fact he's going to potentially build out a role and be the number 1 of this offense, I doubt that's going to be the case, considering one week it's Kadarius Toney, the other it's Sky Moore, and the next is Rashee Rice. We're in a little bit of a rotation, but nonetheless, if he's available, you could take a flyer out on him, considering he's currently only rostered in 26% of Yahoo leagues, 42% of sleeper leagues. Again, a lot of people aren't sleeping on him via that platform. The final couple players, Jameson Williams, he comes off of his suspension in week 7. Again, he's suspended for 6 games. Josh Reynolds not having an impact in yesterday's game continues to make me think Jameson Williams coming back could make an immediate impact. Otherwise, outside of that, the fact that Robert Woods is still only rostered in a very small percentage of leagues is surprising. Therefore, I wanted to go ahead and mention him once again, considering how much target upside he continues to get within that organization. Moving on, let's go ahead and remind you guys, if you have not yet already, be sure to check out the 1.01 brand, the official merchandise line of the Andrew Kirchhoff YouTube channel. Again, at this current moment in time, you can travel to andrewkirchhoffshop.com, check out the link, support the channel, rep the brand, and of course, get yourself stylish, comfortable, and of course, high quality clothing for your most stressful of upcoming fantasy football Sundays. Thank you very much for the support going forward. All right, let's talk about the tight end and quarterback positions. Players that I think obviously should be picked up. Jake Ferguson, currently rostered in 41% of Yahoo leagues, 34% of sleeper leagues. Another consecutive week of 7 or more targets, 7.3 fantasy points. In the grand scheme, had himself a fantastic week, despite how terrible the Dallas Cowboys were, especially down in the red zone. Moving on to Luke Musgrave, only rostered in 18% of Yahoo leagues, 25% of sleeper leagues. 8 targets, 6 receptions, 49 receiving yards against a team that plays extremely well against the tight end position. Obviously, they didn't perform up to their overall standard, but nonetheless, going forward, if Christian Watson, Aaron Jones are going to miss time against the Detroit Lions, I think Luke Musgrave is a great play. Logan Thomas is our number 3, was in the concussion protocol in week 3, obviously considering he sustained that on a touchdown reception in week 2 against the Denver Broncos, but ultimately going forward, taking on the Philadelphia Eagles in week 4, an advantageous matchup. Logan Thomas only rostered in 4% of Yahoo leagues, 8% of sleeper leagues. Let's move on to the quarterback conversation. CJ Stroud, in the last 2 weeks of performances in a 4-point per passing touchdown format, 21.46, 20.6. Ultimately, if he's going to continue to play as well as he has, I mean, he takes on the Pittsburgh Steelers this upcoming week. I think it's an advantageous matchup ultimately, and I do expect him to have himself a great performance overall. Matthew Stafford has not played yet tonight. His overall performance could end up dictating the change if he's a higher overall priority in comparison, but as of right now, Matthew Stafford, he's not throwing touchdowns. Hopefully we can find that eventually, but this upcoming week, in week 4, takes on the Indianapolis Colts. In week 5, with Cooper Kupp back, take on the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the more battered secondaries. Matthew Stafford could be of value going forward. And of course, we have Russell Wilson, who takes on the Chicago Bears in their terrible defense. I expect Russell Wilson to have himself a lot of success, mainly because of the matchup. Otherwise, thus far this season, 15.18, 25.9, and 14.24. In comparison to replacing a guy like Justin Fields, all 3 of these options, quite frankly, work. Let's move on to kickers and defenses. Beginning with our number 1 kicker, we have Dustin Hopkins. Dustin Hopkins, thus far this season, has made 7 field goals in 3 weeks. He's put up 12, 9, and 12 fantasy points thus far this season, only rostered in 2% of leagues, whether Yahoo or Sleeper. Moving on to a player that is only rostered in 1% or 0% of leagues on those 2 platforms, Eddie Pinheiro and Kaimi Fairbairn. Eddie Pinheiro has scored himself 6 field goals in the last 3 weeks, putting up 13 and 11 in the last 2 weeks in specific. Kaimi Fairbairn, 8 field goals made in the first 3 weeks. 8, 9, and 13 fantasy points have been his contributions in the last 3 games. When we move on to potential starting defenses that you can stream in the given week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are expected to have been dropped going into the Philadelphia Eagles matchup. So if you have an opportunity of picking him up and playing them against the New Orleans Saints, who will be quarterbacked by Jameis Winston. The last time Jameis Winston in week 2 of the 2022 season took on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he threw 3 interceptions against his former team. We have seen the Tampa Bay Buccaneers already accumulate 9 fantasy points and 17 fantasy points in their first 2 weeks. Obviously, we don't have the results against the Philadelphia Eagles, but we're not expecting them to shut down the Eagles offense. But going into week 4 against the New Orleans Saints should find themselves success. The Denver Broncos, despite the fact that they have had 0 and -1 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks of their overall performances, had a 70 bomb dropped on their head. I expect them to play well, specifically going up against the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears have given up 15, 17, and 11 fantasy points in the last 3 performances to opposing defenses. I'm expecting this team to potentially bounce back. If they don't, I won't be surprised considering how poorly they've played, but I'm hoping they can find some sort of success in the given week. The final defense I wanted to mention is the Cincinnati Bengals. They'll take on the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans, twice this season as an offense, really have done nothing against the New Orleans Saints, in which they only scored field goals and, of course, got completely shut out if it wasn't for that 40-yard field goal from Nick Folk against the Cleveland Browns. So I expect the Cincinnati Bengals, only rostered in 38% of leagues, to be of value going into the week as a potential streaming option for week 4. That's going to cover it for me today. Thank you everybody for watching. Again, if you guys have not yet already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're making daily fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2023 season. Also, if you guys haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy at this current moment in time, you can use code Andrew. Get my rankings sent from me individually straight to you every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. Again, be sure to check your spam folder on Sunday mornings, but those rankings by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, and flex, all of it available. So be sure to go ahead, sign up today, make a first-time deposit, minimum of $10, but you can also get a deposit match up to $500 if you're interested. Be sure to go ahead, play the Pick'ems game tonight. I think Puka Nacua going higher than his overall receiving yards is an automatic. We've talked about that in the last couple of days in terms of the slips that I've put together. But either way, take advantage of the opportunity. And until tomorrow, we'll be talking about the running back position. I'll see you guys. Peace.